Hey guys, John coming to you from Evolve Custom Rod Shops. Finally showing you the foam core video that a lot of people have asked for. As you can see here, I have this silicone bread pan from Bed Bath & Beyond. Make sure you use your 20% off coupon. Showing you the measurement of it. By these measurements that I'm taking on the top and the sides, I should be able to get at least 2 foam cores, depending on the size of your pan. Now you could use a metal pan, but you're going to have to use some kind of release agent in order to get it out of that pan. And rather than use a release agent, I just decided to buy a silicone pan. Next thing you'll need is a Sharpie. This is to mark your measurements on your pan. If you're looking at the side of the pan, measure from top to bottom and side to side. Now this is on the smaller ends of the pan, the long end of the pan. Okay, mark the halfway point from side to side and mark the halfway point from top to bottom. This will give you a rough idea what the middle of the pan is. From there, you want to mark halfway between the edge of the pan and the middle of the pan. This is where I'm going to put my mandrels. You also want to measure from top to bottom, which should be the same measurement you had before. Make an X just so you know where to drill. You're going to do the same thing on the other side. Measure, 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 measure. You can take a lot of time with this and make it exact. Because I'm turning them down, I'm not so worried about them being completely exact. You can see here I got my measurements on each side. Okay, next thing you want to go for, you're going to need your drill and you're going to need your drill bits. Doesn't matter what kind of drill bits they are, you just want something that'll work. So what I'm doing is I'm grabbing 2 sizes smaller than the 1/4 inch that I'm drilling, because I'm doing a 1/4 inch and a 3/8 mandrel. That way just makes it a little bit easier. You know, a lot of the bass rods I do are larger diameter blanks. So I drill the first hole for the 1/4 inch. Now I drew it 2 sizes smaller. I believe it's a 3/16. And we got a good fit. Flip it to the other side. I'm going to drill the other side out. And don't worry if you don't get it perfect. It's going to be close enough. Okay, now I'll take my mandrel, make sure it goes through both sides. And way to go. You see I got a mandrel through a silicone bread pan. Reason I went a little smaller is so the expanding foam doesn't pour out the sides. The next one for the 3/8, I'm going to do a 5/16 drill bit. Grab that, put that in, do the same thing. Again, if you're a little off your measurement, it's okay. If you want to make an exact measurement, you can do a drill press, put a wood block behind it, and do all that. I don't see that necessary. Because again, once I turn these down, they're going to have perfect form because I have a mandrel through the center of them. Now you could theoretically make the foam and then drill the hole through it and put your mandrel through that way, but this to me feels easier. Okay, there's a 3/8 mandrel and the 1/4 inch mandrel. Now, one thing to let you know is, since I'm using these for foam cores, I only use these for foam cores because they actually develop a seasoning on them. Now, next part you want to do is put on your gloves. These gloves are going to protect you from the foam. Grab some Vaseline. You can use a release agent. Stoner makes a release agent, but I don't like to use that in the shop with epoxy because it can lead to fish eyes when you go to put epoxy on because the stuff sticks around for so long. Take a thin coat of Vaseline, put it over the mandrels, slide them around a little bit to make sure you got on both ends. Not an excessive, you don't have to glob. Once you do this a few times, it actually gets easier and easier because, like I said, these mandrels will actually get seasoned to the foam cores. Okay, we're done with that part. We're going to wipe the Vaseline off our hands. That way we don't contaminate the expanding foam. Now this is a 6-pound expanding foam. It's a 1-to-1 ratio, so I'm going to measure it by weight. Now, this is the first time using this pan, but based on its size, I'm going to do 3 ounces of part A and 3 ounces of part B. If you guys ask me where I got my foam from, my expanding foam, I can't tell you because the guy doesn't carry it anymore. So you'll have to go on to the marine sites and just say 6-pound expanding foam. And then you'll want to read the manufacturer's instructions on how to mix it. This particular expanding foam requires high-speed agitation. Putting part A in there first. Putting 3 ounces in there. You want to be exact about this. Once you're at 3 ounces, grab part B. Some of these mix 2-to-1. I think most of them are 1-to-1. I'm not 100% sure. Again, they're all a little bit different. So I'll put 3 ounces of part B in there. Alright, you can see the two layers are pretty well separated. It's basically inert at this point. It's not doing anything. It won't do anything until I agitate it. I'm going to get my mandrels that have been coated, whether you use a release agent or what I'm using. I'm putting a little silicone pad down. That way I can lay my mixing bit. These mixing bits are sold at Harbor Freight. They're sold online. You can buy them just about anywhere. Put it in my drill. Make sure you got a high-speed drill. The little 12 volts may not do the job. The little nickel cadmium 18 volts might not even spin fast enough. This is 18 volt lithium ion, works pretty well, but a drill one will get to fast enough speed. As you can see here, I brought up my stopwatch. This takes 45 seconds of high-speed agitation. Start it, and as I start it, I turn on my drill. Okay, you can see it immediately starts to mix. While you are doing this, do not lift the drill out of the cup. If you do, you will have sticky, expanding foam everywhere. I've done this before. Do not do it. Make sure the drill comes to a complete stop before you pull it out of this cup. I repeat, make sure the drill comes to a complete stop before you pull it out of this cup. Once 45 seconds is up, it's going to start the chemical reaction, so it's going to start reacting pretty quickly. So I'll take my mixing bit out, set it on my little silicone pad, and then start pouring my foam in. Now, again, this is the first time doing it this way. I used to use a mold, which I no longer have. Just make sure you get it as even as possible on all three sides. It's going to expand. It's going to encase this. You could try doing it in 2 pours. I don't know how that's going to react. I want one solid pour. That way I make sure that it's not dealing with a secondary chemical reaction. Okay, as I speed this up here, you're going to watch the chemical reaction take place. It's pretty cool. Walk away because you might overlook it. You might look at it too hard and say, "Oh, it's not going to work. It's not going to work." It's going to work. Depending on the size of your pan, though, you might have to add more or take away some depending on how small or large your pan is. Most of the manufacturers will give you a guideline. Still very sticky at this point. Very sticky. It's also pretty warm because it's chemical reaction going on. Here I am making a smiley face in the top just because. Pretty neat. Pretty neat stuff. Okay, now that it's all hardened, this is about 45 minutes later. It hardens in about half an hour, but depending on what foam you use will depend on how long they want you to let it sit. Take my vice grips, grab the end of the mandrel. Once the vice grips get locked on there, oh, there we go, nice and tight. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just turn it to one side or the other. Spin it around, you can see it's loose. It'll slide right out. That's it. You do the same with the other side. Wrench it, slides right out. And again, the first time you do this with a brand new mandrel, it might be a little bit more difficult. Now here's the benefit to using the silicone. I didn't have to use a release agent on the pan itself. I just push it out. And because nothing sticks to silicone, comes out perfect. Looks like a beautiful piece of foam bread with 2 holes in the middle of it. I'm going to put my mandrels back in there and you'll see why shortly. Next course of action is partial cleanup. This stuff will break right off the little plastic thing. You just kind of have to pick it off a little bit and it'll eventually clean up. Okay, if you don't have a bandsaw, table saw, or something you can cut that on, here I got this little coping saw with a coping saw blade on it. I'm going right down the middle, right in between the two rods. Once it bottoms out, because you can only go so deep with the coping saw, you will actually pull it back out. Now, because you have the line in the foam, you're going to start in line with that, and you're just going to continue on and follow it. And then check the other side to make sure you're in line with the back side of the foam. Looks good. Just continue down, and it'll follow right down the seam and cut it in half. Now, the reason I'm showing you this way is some people don't have bandsaws. I have a bandsaw, but you know what? Some people don't. And I'm just showing you some of the easiest ways you can do it. The stuff is super easy to work with. You can see I'm trimming it down here just so I don't have to take so much off on the lathe. Now, I normally would turn these on a little Harbor Freight lathe I have that I've shown you in my carbon fiber handle video. But in this case, I'm going to just use my regular old bench lathe, my rod lathe, for turning this down, because it is that easy to work with. Any of the foam arbors, anything you guys do with foam is so easy to work with. The only issue with foam is once you take it off, you can't put it back on. So it doesn't fit in my rod chuck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build up an arbor so it does. Just right over to my masking tape, and away we go. I'm going to get it all built up a little bit. That way the jaws of the lathe can lock down on it. There we go. That was enough. Doesn't look very appealing sitting here like this. Doesn't look like a grip. Doesn't look like much of anything. But with just a little bit of effort, it'll go a long way. I'm moving it over to my wrapping motor. Another advantage to using a lathe as opposed to using this, the motor on my lathe is a little heavier duty, so it won't be affected as much. A lot of turning on a rod lathe motor, which is a sewing machine motor, might cause an issue for longevity on the motor. So here's one thing I can use. This is the stuff I use to build the reamers, your custom made reamers. This is the reamer abrasive. Works really well. As you can see, I'm just wrapping it around the foam and takes it right off. You can see it's just turning this square monstrosity into a nice round foam core. Now you could do this the whole way. This is how most people do their cork, is just with sandpaper, and that's fine. It works just perfectly fine. I'll show you another thing you can use, and this is on your lathe. This is a chisel, a sharp chisel, and you use the edge of the chisel or the flat part of the chisel. Just take your time, because if you cut too deep, eventually it'll smooth out the inside of the bore and it won't stick. If this does happen, you can put a little piece of tape around your mandrel so it doesn't cause any issues. You also want to use a mandrel that is specifically for turning. You don't want to use your seasoned mandrels for this, because if you start cutting into the seasoning, it won't come out as easy. Make sure you watch the video on how to do the carbon fiber grips. That'll give you an idea of what you can do with this stuff. It's really endless. Guys, thanks for subscribing. I hope this was helpful. Make sure you ask if you have any questions. Thanks again for watching. Make sure you like and share my videos. I really appreciate you guys, and I appreciate your support.